Good afternoon. This is Critical Talk with Professor Amina Al Dean for Muslim Network TV. This afternoon, we're going to explore the concerns, issues, and whatever else about the university, which has come up a lot. I still have a granddaughter who is graduating this weekend, or maybe it's tonight. I better figure that out. Um, it has been a mess, both for faculty, staff, and students. With us tonight, we have Professors Mark Delancey and Scott Paith. Um, Mark Delancey is an associate professor of history of art and architecture and a former director of the Islamic World Studies program, unless you're doing it again, at DePaul University in Chicago. His latest book is Conquest and Construction in Palace Architecture in Northern Cameroon. Professor Paith is a professor in the field of Christian ethics and public theology. And because you have so many books, I'm just going to list the latest one, which is the Niebuhr Brothers in Armchair. hmm, Four armchair theologians. I'm sorry. Okay. So, two different men who are my colleagues, who I have enjoyed over the years, although I'm sure I gave them a run for their money. Um, and I wanted to talk about the university. The information is confusing, as I'm sure faculty, staff, and students are confused about what's going to go when. So let's start with the question about what has happened. For example, faculty at DePaul and at other places have always taught some online courses, some hybrid courses, and some face to face courses. But then when the pandemic and shut me inside came, everybody who was teaching was forced into an online pattern, whether they had any experience or not. Can you can you just give our listening and viewing audience an idea of the chaos that ensued? Whichever one of you wants to go first.
Mark, do you want to tackle that first?
You're absolutely right. It has been a chaotic half year. I mean, it's a spring period. It's been very chaotic. I think DePaul and other quarter schools had the good luck that this all kind of came to a head at the end of one quarter and the beginning of the other. So there was that moment where people could say, "Oh, we gotta make this switch over." But yeah, different universities have more or less of their coursework available online.
Mm.
For my department, for example, the History of Art and Architecture department, we were originally offering a couple of, maybe two courses online was the intention, and suddenly all the other courses had to be shifted online in a week. People had
A lot of time.
it was crazy. And a big part of that is simply learning the technology, right?
Yeah.
It's not just because Zoom works well for meetings, but when you're trying to teach a class of students who've been dispersed across the country in different time zones, sometimes different countries of the world, people go home to their families in crisis times, and so the advice for online classes is that they should be not face to face like this, not like a live meeting online, but rather that lessons should be pre-recorded that students can access when they're able to focus on their coursework and have some quiet in the house and all that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But if you're a professor who's taught on face to face all their life, suddenly you have to learn how to record, how to have a PowerPoint without your face showing up and looking goofy in the middle of your PowerPoint and things like that.
Right.
So that was a really big learning curve for many professors, I think. Just in to switch over so quickly.
Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I come at this from a couple of different perspectives because, on the one hand, I've taught online for a number of years, but I was also on the task force that was actually grappling with the question of whether or not we were going to make the move to be online in March. And the way that that actually went was,
Wait a minute. Whether you're going to be online, what would you going to be if you were not going to be online?
well, it was the question of whether or not we were going to be in person for the spring
Oh,
because of the pandemic, or whether we were
right.
going to move to online.
I
And what
see.
happened was that I got notified on a Sunday that we were going to have this task force to look into this.
Mhm.
On Monday, the task force convened. By Tuesday, we were saying we really probably need to think about what it would mean to be online. And by Wednesday, we were saying, yeah, we're going to be online. Things
Kidding
happen
me.
fast.
Oh my God.
And then everything after that was, okay, well, now we've got to figure out how we're going to do this. And it was really like turning around a battleship in the middle of the ocean, trying to figure out how we deal with students in the dormitories. How do we actually get all the people who haven't taught online before into an online setting? Did we have the bandwidth and the technology? And in a lot of ways, I was privileged because I had a background in teaching online, and so therefore it was fairly easy for me to make a mid-course correction. But for a lot of our faculty, it was a very jarring shift, and it required a great deal of emotional and intellectual investment as they completely had to rethink their pedagogy for a completely different context.
Go
Let me,
ahead, Mark.
let me add to that, not just the pedagogy and so on, but the sheer technology. We've heard a lot, I think, with CPS and so on about students who don't have access to good internet connections and so on. Same is true of professors at times. I had a professor in my department who had no computer. I had professors who didn't have Wi-Fi at home, and
Yeah.
suddenly they're being asked to do that, and particularly and it became an issue with the different status of professors as well, because suddenly adjunct professors who don't make very much are being asked to buy computer equipment, get Wi-Fi,
Right.
etc. So these are
Overnight.
overnight, yeah,
Literally overnight.
things that came up.
I think that students, on the other hand, were in the same kind of chaos because a lot of students will use the university's Wi-Fi so that they don't have to worry about some things. But our students living in cities and in rural areas also had to do a lot of stuff. And on their end, it was learning how to use the platform for those who had never taken an online course from their perspective. So I just heard about the chaos. Um, and how, for the professor who's never taught online. No, let me go back. For the professor who has taught online, DePaul, and I don't know if this is true of all universities, had a particular platform where you could upload videos, you could upload whatever, and it is there and accessible for you for a particular day's class. For professors who did not teach online, they had some face-to-face flexibility. And I don't know that the people who taught online didn't have the same flexibility because they could choose to show or not show um, a particular video or talk or a PowerPoint or something else. But I can't imagine having to rethink a syllabus in 24, 36 hours.
Yeah.
Now it becomes what's important. students don't listen to you anyway. So now it becomes what's really, really important.
Yeah.
And how did you all manage?
Well, I had the good luck that I wasn't teaching this quarter, so
Oh, that is totally unfair.
however,
Uh-huh.
I did, I went through some of the training myself so that I could help my faculty who were less technologically savvy to work their way through it. But I lost my train of thought now. What was the question again?
It's about me talking to older people.
So if I can jump in there.
I'll refine my train of thought. Sorry.
I mean, that question of sort of turning on a dime. I was teaching this quarter, but only one course, which I think, again, I was a very
You guys.
and we have a lot of faculty who, like our term faculty, will teach 3 courses a quarter.
Right.
And so for them, it wasn't just a question. It wasn't just about turning a battleship in the middle of the ocean. It was about
It was a fleet
simultaneously in formation. And if you have that background in online learning, you at least know how the resources are supposed to work. But if you don't have that background, then it's everything. I mean, I cannot tell you how many conversations I had with faculty members who would just be like, they'd look at me and they'd be like, I am exhausted.
I can imagine. But was the platform you mentioned earlier about bandwidth, was the platform able to handle everybody being online?
I think that was a question early on. And I recall being in meetings when some of our IT people are like, well, we think that we can handle it, but we're not sure. And if we we've got some backup plans in place. And so if we need to move, for example, I mean, I taught my courses asynchronously, which is to say that, the students didn't have to be in a particular place online in a particular time. They could do all of their coursework sort of at their leisure, and there were videos and there were some lecturettes and then there were readings. But again, that's a particular pedagogy and you kind of have to be trained in it to do it well.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you're used to just a conversation like this, but with 40 students in a classroom,
right,
and you just want to port that over to an online setting, then you have to use something like Zoom.
Yeah.
And the concern was that we knew Zoom worked for what it was currently doing. We didn't know if every university in the United States moved online and used whether or not Zoom could handle it. And apparently Zoom was able, at least in my experience, Zoom worked very effectively most of the time. And you could scale up for the particular purposes that you needed. So Zoom ended up being equal to the task, at least most of the time. But we did have backup plans in place where we'd say, well, if Zoom doesn't work, then use Google Meets. And if Google Meets doesn't work, then try Microsoft Teams. And so, so there were contingency plans in place. But I think most people, most of the time, were able to work all right with Zoom.
I know with some of my professors, I think in making that switch over, on the one hand, some who had resisted moving to online teaching before suddenly had to, and some of them found themselves actually enjoying it a little bit. And I had one professor calling me and telling me about all the new things she found she could do as a result, making her course much richer. So including music, including dance, including video clips of all these different things and so on, virtual visits to museums. So I think there were some unexpected
pluses.
At the same time that it was extremely difficult. And as much with thinking about how one does this interaction as well. Scott was talking about the asynchronous versus synchronous. Whether you're recording something ahead of time that they can consume whenever they want, or whether you're speaking real time versus Zoom or some combination thereof. And coming into this, we were all told, look, because of students having stressful situations at home, different time zones and so on, you want to record it and let them be able to access this on their own time, at their own pace. And then professors, started getting students saying, we want to have some FaceTime. We want to do the Zoom thing.
I was one of them.
Maybe start for interaction, right?
Right,
But
right.
also there's a capacity to give and take and discuss things that you lose, and so they started doing that. But then you start worrying about, is this disadvantaging some of your students at the same time? So I don't know what the answers are to that.
But let's take that point. What is the college experience? If it's online and in your bedroom or in your study, is it a college experience, or are we morphing the college, what we understood as the college experience, into something else?
I've thought about that a lot, again, because I've taught online for a number of years, and I know that I prefer pedagogically and personally an in-person class experience. And there are things you can do online that are useful, but for me, the experience of really learning, of doing what doing what college is supposed to be, the give and take of intellectual discourse, all of that is really optimally taking place in that classroom environment. So even though I'll teach online, when I have to, I think that the university is at its best and really fulfilling its mission when it optimizes that experience of being in person, on campus, surrounded by people, all of which are exactly the things that this pandemic made impossible.
Right.
And it's also outside the classroom, right? So, I'm in my department with my door open every day. And students drop in to ask me questions, to talk with me. I pass them on campus and we have discussions, or, I point them to resources, all those sorts of interactions that are just by happenstance are
A part of that experience. But also the clubs.
And
the clubs that young people join, that all of this together contributes to their maturing into good adults.
Yeah. Oh, and I remember being, when I was in college, I think I learned as much about, as much just living, in community with all these different people from all over the place, all over the world. I learned at least as much by interacting with them as I did by sitting in classrooms. And that's made now.
What are you saying over there, Scott?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was saying I completely agree. I feel like there were classes that I took in college that I do not have a single memory of, but I have many memories of sitting in the student center talking about philosophy and art and politics and literature with friends and colleagues, and we would do that for hours on end outside of the classroom. And to me, that was as much what my college education was as anything that took place in the classroom.
Well, I also feel limited as a professor, not having those interactions, though, because you can say, yes, a student can email you and so on, but do they? Not so much. There is a physical distancing, and that's associated with a sort of psychological distancing, I think.
Yeah. Well, what does the college experience become now?
Well, it becomes, in the context of COVID, the college experience is the experience of these online forums, this online education, which to me, you can learn things that way, but you can't experience what it means to be in a university that way. And I think that for a lot of us, when we look at what the fall might look like, the challenge is, can we keep our students safe while bringing back as much of that experience of the university as we can? And it's a real challenge because if we need to be online or mostly online or largely online, and we can't give our students the fullness of that experience, then there's a real valid question that many of our students have, which is, why then should I go to, say, a place like DePaul University, right, which is not inexpensive? You know, if I'm going to get an education that is
Online.
comparable to something that I could get in an online university. Now, I think that there's an answer to that question, and the answer is that DePaul does online better than those online universities, and I think we do.
Yeah.
It still means that they don't get all of those other ancillary experiences that make up the totality of the university experience. And so,
Well, how are the kids who have to take either in our version of a Common Core science that have labs gonna? You can't do a lab online.
Well, they're talking about like for courses that are that need that on-campus aspect.
Right.
They're talking about bringing them back.
yeah, but the
Oh,
question you're
okay.
asking is exactly the question that we're grappling with, because if you have one of these classes that Mark is talking about, that we consider like it's necessary that class be taught face to face.
Printmaking, right, for the arts.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm going to bring printmaking press into your bedroom, right? So,
right, and it's lab classes, it's art classes, it's a lot of our
Right. Dance, theater.
yeah, and so so for all of those classes, if we can't provide that essential experience, then dogs. If we can't provide that essential experience, then
Okay, Scott, you can put your dogs up now. Before it was the kids, now it's the dogs.
So if we can't provide that essential experience, then we need to help our students to understand, that they're still getting a good education, even if they're not getting everything that they deserve from the education. And then the hope is that we're going to get to a point where we can go back to something that looks like normal for the college experience within the next year, and then be able to actually give the students the totality of that experience. Nobody, in my experience, really likes the way we're doing education now. We just all realize that it's a necessity imposed upon us by a really tragic set of circumstances.
Very, very true. But let me take you on two paths. I've just got to decide which one first. A part of that college experience is the, if one can, living in the dorm. The dorm monies are hooked up with scholarships and grants and all of the things that students try to get to come to school. If the dorm is missing and the meal plans don't work for some, much like the CPS student who gets a meal, from school, we have college students where there is some of them in their, I'm not sure if it's a Pell Grant or what it is, where they get uh, a stipend for food. We have other parents who don't need a grant for it, but buy meal plans. And all of those things come together and figure into what universities see as to how they allocate or make up budgets or some of those things. Then we had people working in food service, dorm cleanup, uh, students that were, what did they call, resident assistants, which was a part of their uh, tuition pack, work study, I guess. And then we had older, folk who sat at those desks that made sure who was supposed to be in there was in there. So what happens? That's a whole bunch of people.
That's why we've been in extensive discussions about just this.
True. I mean, we are, for all intents and purposes, a town that exists in the middle of Chicago with our own citizenry, with our own
Right.
police force in a certain sense, with our own, with all of the things that go into a town, our own facilities, and and our own budget. And the problem is that a budget revolves around revenue and expenses. And
Right.
we have gotten massive hits on the revenue front just since March, and we've had to make adjustments on the fly for those. And if we're anticipating, well, if this goes on for a while, then it's going to be very painful for the university for precisely a lot of the people that you just mentioned.
And
Yeah.
the university did increase financial aid this year. So, it's not like, we cut back on financial aid to try to help solve our financial problems. That actually increased, so which makes the financial difficulty even harder.
Mm.
And trying to figure out ways to continue on through this moment and hopefully come out the other end.
But
And back to
expenses
normal.
are going through the roof. You've got to sanitize classrooms.
Mhm.
You got to sanitize everything.
And we've got,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, we've got people who's right now they're spending hours every day to come up with a plan. Where
outta
if we have students in a classroom, at 8 a.m., and the class runs to 9:30, then we say, well, okay, then we can't use that classroom again till
So you
10. Exactly. And then meanwhile, we have someone else coming in and we got to clean it up. And there's a whole plan that has to be in operation in order for that to work. I'd never in my life realized all of the logistical complexities that went into just making the day-to-day functions of the university happen.
Keeping people safe too. I mean, the last thing you
Yeah.
want is for students to come to the university, from mom and dad to send their kid to school and they get sick.
Right.
You don't want to.
COVID.
Right? Yeah. So
But we also have a bathroom problem. I mean, I have no idea. I can't say I envy you guys. I can't say I enjoy watching it. It just thinking about it is far beyond anything I can do. But I'm thinking you can't socially distance in a bathroom. What do you do?
I'm not sure how. I'm not actually. Now I feel like I need to bring up the bathroom question.
Okay, put that on your
Put
list.
that on the to-do list. Are we thinking about this? I'm sure that they are. I just haven't
must
gotten
be.
a memo about what it involves.
I think you can get so focused on the classroom.
Yeah.
And what is it going to do for our max number of students in a class? If you're online, you're fine.
Yeah.
But if you talk about bringing students back in physically to a classroom, are you talking about running multiple sessions of one course so that you have a minimal amount of students in the room at the same time with cleaning times in between?
That's one of the strategies. Right now, and again, this is still under development, but right now they're looking at.
But it's June.
I know. Well, but it's taken.
We went online in 1 week, so that's
It's taken
ages.
us to develop the plans. Right now, we've got to implement them, but we're looking at different strategies for teaching. So one possibility might be an all online class. For example, I expect that all of my classes next year are just by default going to be online. Then we've got the classes that have to be in person, like the labs or some of the print classes, something like that. And then we've got this sort of kind of wide swath of classes that are in the middle, where if it's safe to offer them in person, we want to offer them in person. But then the question is, how do we make it safe? And for there, we're looking at, the CARES Act gave universities funding for, among other things, trying to update classrooms for purposes of enabling students to to learn in the midst of COVID. And the way that DePaul is
Oh,
doing that is that we're updating a lot of our classrooms, not all of them, in order to allow for a kind of it's kind of a hybrid model whereby you'll have one section of a class and some students will be in that class in person, say on Tuesday, and then
right,
the remainder of the class will be online. And then on Thursday, they'll switch. And so some of the students will be in class and the rest of the class will be online, but it'll be the opposite. And so that way, everyone gets an in-person class experience, but they're able to they can have a critical mass of students in the class, but on any given day, you only have enough students in the class so that you can maintain safe social distance. But even there, I mean, there are lots of questions that are unanswered about how this virus spreads. Are you actually safe for an hour and a half in a classroom if if everyone's breathing on one another, if the professor is
right, because we don't have fresh
speaking to the whole.
pumped in air.
Well, they're updating the filters on the rooms and so on to filter out particles and stuff like that. But there was also, something as simple, somebody at some point was suggesting they put shields on the lecterns, right? The clear plexiglass shields on the lecterns. And people said, like I stand behind the lectern the whole time, right? You walk back,
Exactly. You walk
forward.
around. You walk
Yeah.
around.
And so, what good does your shield do then? And this is a concern. These are concerns from the student, but also the professor's perspective, right? And how that works out, with these, take the science classes, for instance, right?
Right, right.
And you're scheduled to teach a science class and it's got a lab and they say, okay, it needs to be taught in person, but you've got family members at home who are particularly susceptible and you
Right.
don't take any risk.
They staying home.
So what happens with that professor? Do they get to choose to not teach the class or not? And this again gets into the status of your faculty member, whether they're full-time and can make it up at some point through, later on the year, or if they're an adjunct faculty member who, if they don't teach the class, they don't get a paycheck. So it's from both sides. Both the students, do they want to be in a classroom? Do they want to be sitting next to somebody? And also from the professor's side.
Okay, let me take you in a different direction. Many parents watching and listening to us really, I don't think, and I know the students don't, know the difference between social sciences, humanities, natural sciences. Like what comes under what. We, on the other hand, have had to fight with humanities being in a fight with technology. And I assume some parts of social science are too. So I'm going to ask you first to give me some categories and tell me what's in them.
Okay.
You can beat me up later, except you can't touch me because it's COVID. Hey.
I mean, if the distinction is between sort of what's the hard sciences, if you like, the social sciences and the humanities, I actually think I'm trying to remember who the theoretician was that used this categories, but described them in a manner that I like better, which is sort of the hard sciences, the soft sciences, and the diffuse sciences, right? Which is to say, so your hard sciences are physics, chemistry, biology, right? Where you do experiments on real world phenomena and you kind of see what the results are and you investigate the natural world. The social sciences, or the soft sciences, if you prefer, are the ones that investigate human cultures, human societies, history, arguably, although I think there are some people who put history in the humanities, but who basically are interested in the question of the interactions of people within society.
Economics, anthropology, those kinds of things.
And then the humanities, or the diffuse sciences, are those that deal with sort of the world of ideas, if you like. So literature, art, philosophy, Mark, help me out here. What else falls into that?
English literature,
languages, things like that. So those, I mean, that's a very sort of rough and ready categorization, but I think it gets at the heart of the question.
And almost every one of these, soft, diffuse, or hard, are being burdened by technology.
No, I don't think that's. I think all three areas are engaging with technology. Whether it's digital arts, whether it's
Mhm.
mapping for geography. We in art history with architectural courses and urbanism courses and so on, we use digital mapping quite a bit. Uh,
Mhm. Well, I
so
kind of think that students see, if I, or here perhaps, if I do humanities or social science, I really can't do IT stuff, which
no,
is not true.
no.
But I don't think that, and this is going to get even more serious in the dilemma we're in now, because there's no advisor to really sit down with you and talk. I mean, I guess they could do it by Zoom, but, or do they even know to talk with you how you can take your love of technology and pair it with, say, religious studies or
Mhm.
art and architecture?
Well, I think what you're pointing to is something that I have a lot of frustration with, which is, well, first, I need to say a couple of things first. One of which is, I believe in my heart, even though this is not a popular position, that the humanities are worth studying, even if you never get any material, economic, or societal benefit out of them, right?
Mhm.
Good literature is worth reading for the pleasure of reading good literature.
Yeah.
Philosophy is worth studying for the pleasure that you get from the world of ideas. Art is worth studying for the pleasure of looking at and understanding, the piece of art that you're looking at.
Mhm.
So even if Evie, so if you said to me, I can prove to you that you will never gain an additional penny as a result of studying philosophy, I would still consider philosophy, religious studies, theology, art, all of those things worthwhile areas of study.
Mhm.
Nevertheless, I also think that it's the case that when we have this sort of putative battle that's going on between STEM and the humanities,
Right.
that the humanities are
Can
suffering.
you say what STEM is?
Sure. Sorry. STEM is science, technology, engineering, and medicine. Uh,
Mathematics.
is it math? Those medicine. Oh,
Mhm.
mathematics. Anyway, so things that fall under those sort of hard science. I consider
Right.
mathematics humanities too, actually, but I
You're
think
weird.
I'm one of the few.
Mhm.
It's a branch of philosophy, but so those categories are, where a lot of people are seeing a great deal of job growth, right? So,
Right.
no science, or you have a computer science degree, then people look at that and they say, well, see, so you walk out of college with an advantage in the marketplace compared to someone who walks out of college with an English literature degree or something like that. But so again, even leaving aside the fact that I think the humanities are worth studying, even if you don't get an economic advantage out of them,
Mhm.
this is not the case that you
Right.
get an economic benefit coming out of college with a humanities degree. You certainly get an economic benefit coming out of college with a humanities degree over someone who hasn't gotten a college degree at all.
Right.
But even at that, over a period of time, the difference in income between someone who might graduate with a degree in engineering and someone who graduates with a degree in English, it closes over time, right?
It does. Yeah.
It never completely closes, but it does close. And I think that when we talk to people about why they should study what they study, I always want to say the skills that you learn in the humanities, writing skills, reasoning skills, critical analysis skills,
Exactly.
those are the skills that will benefit you no matter what career you go into. And I can always learn how to do accounting, engineering, all of the applied skills that you need for any particular job because I learned those things in the humanities field. Whereas if you train for yourself for a particular narrow area of inquiry, say
Mhm.
a particular programming language in computer science, then
Right.
and you're always going to be playing catch up with changes in the field, and you're always
Exactly.
putting yourself in a position where you can be rendered obsolete by changes to the technology. Whereas my philosophy degree, my religion degree, those are never going to be rendered obsolete by changes in the field.
I'd also
Mark?
say that, that there's this vision that all of these fields are sort of hermetically sealed off from one another.
Mm-hmm.
We in academia, I think, have been talking about for a long time about breaking down the silos, breaking down the barriers between disciplines, interdisciplinary work, and so on. That I don't think people outside of academia recognize as much. But really, with my majors in art history, for example, I often see them double majoring and minoring in this, that, and the other. And it's finding ways to bring together their diverse interests. And there'll be art history and math double majors, right? Or chemistry and math, and chemistry and art history. That clearly shows they're not seeing these as discrete things; they're seeing them as overlapping. And oftentimes particularly in my introductory level courses, I really try to make that point to them. So with my Islamic art course, for example, that I teach, we have a week in which we talk about how, historically mathematicians engage with architects to produce some of the great works of architecture in for example, poetry, and how it's engages with the decoration of works of art. All these intersections that my students don't always conceive of. I try to make that front and center and show them how they can integrate these different ways of thinking within their own studies.
So how do we um I'm just trying to envision mentoring and advising students coming out of high school. Scott's daughter is going to be coming out, but even before she comes out, seeing what has happened now is going to shape her psyche a little bit about, or make her anxious about what can I do, how can I do it, do I need to change, whatever. My granddaughter just graduated from college, and she was a mess. I mean, um, it was a mess because the kids had to figure out how to be okay with a virtual graduation. And different schools did it in different ways. How can we help parents who are listening and those students nearing the end of one level understand the possibilities for the next?
So somebody told me this when I was a junior or senior in high school, and I really took it to heart, and I tell everybody that I can when the opportunity arises, which is when it comes to college. The most important thing is to study what you love. And I tell I'm blessed that my parents were willing to let me study what I wanted to study in college. They never said to me, well, no, you have to study business or you have to study engineering. They said, you're the first person in our family to go to college. Study what you want, learn what you want, we'll support you. And that has been an enormous benefit to me. And so, again, when this person said, study what you love, don't worry about making a living off of it. You're going to make a living one way or another, right? You're going to make a living one way or another. The question is, this is the 4 years of your life when you have an opportunity to dive into a subject to the exclusion of other concerns. And you should take advantage of that and study what you love. And then when you come out of college, the things that you've learned and the wisdom and the knowledge that you've had will work to your benefit in figuring out what you want to do for a living, how you want to pay your bills. But again, if you're always studying for the sake of figuring out, well, how can I game the system so that I never have to worry about my job? Then eventually you're going to be disappointed because your job will be rendered obsolete.
Exactly.
Skills will change, and the robots are coming for us all. And The one thing the robots can't do, in my, and I'll die on this hill. Robots can't do philosophy.
No, I
Robots,
was getting ready to say that's about the only thing they can do. But Mark, you came up in a household with two professors.
Yeah.
Did they tell you to study what you love?
Oh, definitely. They told me, they accepted that, and also when I bombed out on things, they were understanding of that too. I came home one quarter. I think it's the beginning of my sophomore year. I had just a breakdown, and
Mhm.
I wound up only passing 2 courses. And I came home and told my parents, "Look, I need, a semester off to figure out what I'm doing here, why I'm in college," and they were upset, but they also understood to some extent that just as much as you have to study what you love, you have to want to be there to some extent too.
To even get to study what you love. Well,
Right?
let me take this a step
Actually,
further.
could
Go
I, could I,
ahead.
could I add on to something
Hmm.
Scott was saying? Was that first of all, I think we have to keep in mind that this is hopefully a short period, that an interregnum that uh, maybe a year, but is not going to be forever.
I
But
pray. I
also in
couldn't take it.
yeah, but also
Mhm.
in terms of ask, and when I advise students, and I have students come in all the time and say, well, I got to do something practical that's going to make me money and so on, and which I understand. Yeah,
Mm.
got to make money someday. Uh,
Mm.
but part of it is also why be in a liberal arts school if you're not going to do that liberal arts thing and get a sampling of this, that, and the other, get a sense of the world of different perspectives.
Mhm.
And I think what I've found most, I mean, something I really want my students to know is that you never know where you're going to get an idea from, right? You never know where inspiration is going to come from. And if you are in one track of classes that's all with the same kind of professors and so on, you don't get that
Mhm.
knowledge that allows you to make that next great leap, that next
But
discovery.
you said something very important, but I think that it is critical. Most parents uh, and students don't know what a liberal arts college is.
Right.
So therefore, that whole philosophy behind being a liberal arts college as opposed to a technical college is never understood. Let me take you somewhere else. Now we have COVID and we have Black Lives Matter, among other organizations, in a group. Is that going to change how we teach, what we teach? Universities are largely white bastions of all of those things you're talking about. How are liberal arts colleges? I don't know how I think about this, but how are liberal arts colleges going to, and maybe they won't, change what they teach, how they teach, who teaches?
Mhm. No, I think these are discussions that were there already and have been brought to a head by this moment, convergence of crises, and and it's not just how do we deal with these things in society, but how do we look inwards and deal with them within our university, which, as you say, is dominated by a certain segment of society, and
Right.
yeah.
Huh. But and I feel, when I was sitting back looking at all of this, I felt so, I don't want to use blessed because then Scott will smile. Let me say honored that most of the guys that were closest to me and on my faculty, some of the issues other black professors have had, I didn't have. I
Mm,
felt that I could talk about anything I wanted to. Now, I never got a thought to and you all would probably say yes, to how people felt about what I wanted to talk about when I wanted to talk about it. And you two in particular, but many others would engage me when I wanted to go off the deep end about one thing or the other. And many of my African American and Latino colleagues have not had that experience, which is why I want to say I hate using blessed. Okay, I'll work on that. All right.
Fortunate.
Fortunate, fortunate. But I mean, we on the other side of this, of the academic portion of this conundrum, we, and I know I didn't ever ask either of you, what did you think about what I wanted to do? You guys just kind of went along with me if it was in the realm of the real.
Mm.
But how did you feel?
Well, I mean, I've everything that you ever enlisted me to do, Amina, I was interested in. I mean, I can think of several projects over the course of years where you're like, you'd get on the phone to me or you drop me an email and you'd say, Scott, I'm thinking about doing this. Are you interested? And
Mhm.
very often I was. If I wasn't, you probably never heard back from me.
Right.
But on the occasions when I was, which was frequently, I
Mhm.
was always happy to be involved because there were such intriguing ideas. In fact, I'll just mention one thing, and this, by the way, goes to a lot of the sort of ancillary stuff that's embedded in your question. I remember, and you probably do too, wanting to be more involved in bringing the university into the jails and prisons. And I was very excited about that, and we did some work on it, and then it wound up, it didn't go anywhere for
Right.
institutional reasons.
Right.
But meanwhile, on a parallel track, we had people doing other things which actually eventually bore fruit, and now we actually have a presence in the Illinois prison system and in the Cook County jail system, which when it comes to these questions of social justice, oppression,
Mhm.
the 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 criminalization of Black lives,
Mhm.
police abuse in the midst of the overpolicing of Black communities. I consider myself to be fortunate to be able to talk about those things with people who have been directly affected by them and who are living out the implications and the consequences of them in the prisons. And
Mhm.
say, this is unjust, this is not right, and how can we begin as people to learn from the observation of injustice, seeing it in front,
Mhm. Mhm.
and be able to imagine a society that is no longer burdened by those things. And that to me is not something that you can quantify in a chemistry class. It's not something that you can
Mhm.
equation on in.
It would be an interesting equation.
It would, but it's something ultimately, I mean, I know economists who would differ from me on this,
Right.
but it's something that you can only get at the heart of those questions when you're looking at it through the lens of the humanities. When you're reading,
Right. Right.
by Ralph Ellison, or you're reading Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail, and you're talking about it in the context of, these are ideas, and these ideas motivate lives, and those people who live those lives go out and they transform their society. And so, insofar as the university is a place where so I'm not sure. I don't think it takes place when the administration makes a statement.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
takes place when professors inspire students, and through the
Right.
inspiration of those students go out and make the world a better place.
Mark?
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, from a more personal perspective, I mean, I'm a professor of African and Islamic studies. I wanted to engage with Islamic world studies. I wanted to engage with our African and Black diaspora studies department. Speaking and meeting with those professors helps me understand the issues that they're facing, right? And that I think others who don't engage with those groups don't even realize are going on. The whole issue of how much service professors in African and Black diaspora studies do way above what most other professors at the university engage in, because they feel a certain that they owe something to the Black student community, for example.
Yeah.
That they are involved with community in a way that many other professors are not. And I see that, and I can understand that. So when these things start breaking out at this moment, it doesn't surprise me. On the other hand, you know, I love Chicago. I chose where I live I chose where I live because it's close to the university. I can get there. It's also a very white area. And so there's this sort of disjunction between the engagement I look forward to at the university that I don't get in my neighborhood, because it's such a segregated city. And that's kind of a thing I see daily in my life when I'm right now I'm in Seattle, but when I'm back in Chicago, that I see on a daily basis. That's hard to make it come together somehow for me.
Well, I think, you know, Chicago does have that reputation. But I think when we walk into our classrooms, we, on a good day, see students from around the world, all of whom are trying to make sense of the environment in which they've landed. How do we, in light of some of the things that have been brought out by these protest march, on one hand, explain these humongous disparities? On the other hand, how do we not make white kids feel that somehow they're getting left out of stuff, you know, or that they should feel guilty? Because it's not about them feeling guilty, but how can you not feel guilty?
You know, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I think that when I try to address these issues, and I mean, I am not necessarily sort of the best positioned person to talk about these issues in terms of, you know, in terms of who I am and the subject matter that I teach, but they come up when I teach ethics. They come up when I in the context of the prison system, and when I have students, often white students, who express something along the lines of guilt, or on the opposite end, they'll express resentment over, you know, feeling as though they're being made to feel guilty. You know, the thing I want to stress is, you know, as with most things, you know, you want to think carefully about, about the perspective of the other person, right? You want to think carefully about, you know, does this person have a point? Is there a valid argument being made on the other side? And the point isn't for me in a classroom to tell a student, you white person sitting in the third row need to feel guilty about these, you know, about these social dynamics. The point is the analysis of these social dynamics, which leads to the perspective that, you know, racism is real, that structural injustice, that the oppression of African Americans and other people of color in this country is real. Does that analysis make sense? And if it makes sense, what does that imply for how we should act and what kind of a society we should strive to build? And I think that asking the question in those terms diffuses a little bit of the personal dimension of it and allows to see the sort of the underlying question. And they may say, okay, I hear what you're saying, and I've listened to this analysis, and I just don't think it makes sense, and therefore I don't buy it. And that, okay, fair enough. But
because when you're seeing, when you're seeing young and old people all protesting together, I just wondered, you know, because you can't get guilty, because that's a different kind of energy that is not only going to let you move so far and then you have to stop because you'll be overwhelmed by the guilt. But Mark, what do you have to chime in on this?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think part of what liberal arts education is intended to do is help you think about the world as it is and how it became that way, and think about the world you want and how you help it become that. And one of the questions I think that's important to ask is why do we identify the way we do? Why does a white person identify primarily as a white person, or a black person primarily as a black person? How did it get that way? And is that really the way you want people to
think of you?
Identify first and foremost in the future? If not, what sort of changes do you have to make to address the problems of the past? That's not a question of guilt. That's a question of how do you be an active citizen?
That's a good question. Well, gentlemen, as usual, it's been great seeing you and speaking with you. And I'm just getting a kick out of this drum set. I mean, that's a fancy where all his DePaul money goes. That's a fantastic drum set. Both of you are globetrotters, and DePaul has been known for faculty who take students and or lecture everywhere. What's going to happen? Last question.
How are we gonna? Well, yeah, I mean, our travel budgets are going to be cut as first and foremost.
Yeah.
But we're looking at ways. There's something kind of wonderful about this moment, in that suddenly everybody's projecting things on Zoom and so on, right? So yesterday morning, I was participating in a discussion of Fatimid period maps that was being held at University of Cambridge in England. I attended a lecture by David Ajayi, the architect of the National Museum of African American History. He was giving a lecture at Princeton, and I could enjoy that.
Zoom right in.
Yeah. And so, I'm thinking of, okay, well, all those people that live so far away that it's terribly expensive to bring them in.
Right.
This is my moment.
But your moment, huh?
So I can't go there, but maybe we can make some lemonade out of these lemons, right?
I'll just say really briefly that, DePaul University has a really great global learning experience that actually is designed to bring people together from around the world online. So in a lot of ways, we are well positioned in this moment to continue to be a global university in the middle of a COVID world.
Thank you both again, and have no fear. I will intrude into your lives again, because as we move toward, I think summer school starts, and I don't have a clue as to what anybody's doing on summer school, but the real onslaught will be what to do about September. So I will give you a moment to get your feet wet, and then I'll intrude into your lives again. How's that?
Sounds good.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you, Amina.